Well, hello there. This is going to be episode 2 of Wide Awake in Babylon. It's a new podcast we're starting up here in Colorado. The reason I'm doing this mainly is because I think that, it would be nice to speak about things that might help us, maintain an energetic presence, maintain sanity, maintain a connection to wisdom, maintain all those things that, keep us churning through this world, even though it seems to be getting rather dark out there. I've heard terms like the Kali Yuga. We're going through the Kali Yuga, which means that the ego has basically dominated consciousness, and it's going to continue to for some time before there's, a giant purge, possibly a whole lot of suffering. And then out the other end, we enter another age where we become closer to wisdom, to consciousness, to, connected to nature again, instead of to this ego-driven world. And, the content that we're going to be getting into in the podcast to follow after this one are those things. What exactly is a manufactured identity? Because I use that word a lot. What exactly is presence? Get into those kinds of things so we can maybe, get a better hold on what we're going to do in this world. Not come apart, not go into madness, not go into just complete fear, just stay above board and realize that, we're on a trajectory here and we're evolving. And consciousness is the new evolution. It's always really been the evolution. And it's going somewhere. So it's good to, have your strength about you to get through it. So anyway, so we got a studio that we're building out right now. It should be ready in a little while. So we'll move it all into there eventually. And that'll be fun. Like I said, we'll start having guests. The second episode, as well as the first, it's just me by myself because we're doing a little bit of a bio. So you can maybe get a better feel for who I am, possibly see where I'm coming from a little bit anyway, and I'll do my best to communicate that. The first one was up to, Carlos. So we got to the Carlos part. So Carlos passed away when I was 27 years old. And it was very rough on me. Very, very rough. I remember being in my parents' house in California. I called back to talk to him. And called this lady Mary that he was also associating with. I said, "Hey, is Carlos around?" She's like, "How did you know?" I said, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Can I talk to him?" She's like, "He just passed away." And it devastated me. It truly devastated me. I remember screaming around the house, I wasn't done yet. Because the teachings that Carlos were taking me on were taking me far away from what society is, what the drive that, we have in society for attaining things, for reaching goals, for, the whole process that you go through. We were doing something completely different. And I had not actually achieved the state that, I was to arrive at, through the time with Carlos. So I kind of felt like I was left out in a void. I couldn't go back to my old world, and I couldn't go to this new one because I had no idea where it even was. So I just kind of felt like I was alone in this void when he passed away. So I'm in my sister's house and I hang up the phone and I'm just running around the house crying and screaming, I wasn't done yet. And she even called my parents. They came over, and it was a very rough night for me. Very rough night indeed. The next night after he had passed away, I was in California, and I was at my ex-wife's parents' house. And I went to bed, and I'm laying down, and all of a sudden, I see it's almost like someone put a picture in front of me. It was a picture of these pillars, and it had a corridor. So it was like a corridor that went out and then long this way. So it was like an L, and I was on the short end of it. And it would go off and to the right. And there were these pillars on it. And I was just looking at this picture, and then I heard this buzz in my head, just about to drift off to sleep. And it was like a sharp, high-pitched noise somewhere in my brain. And all of a sudden, I'm standing on that corridor, that L-shaped corridor that I was seeing in the picture. I was standing on it. There was nothing around me. I could see no stars, nothing. It was just black. Other than this corridor that was lit up, pillars lit up. So it was kind of putting off a glow that just kind of lit up the area it was around. And I'm standing there and I don't really know what's going on. I'm definitely astonished, but I'm just kind of hanging out there. And I'm touching the pillars and they're making sounds. And when I walk, it kind of leaves impressions. So I was kind of just, mesmerized by that. And then down the long corridor that went off to the right, this light shoots down and I see it. It's really bright and it catches my attention. So I walk up to where the 90-degree turn from the short end of the L down the corridor, the long side. I turn and I look and I see there's a man sitting at the edge of it. And he's wearing all white, like khaki clothing. And he's got like a little sombrero on, not a really big one, but a smaller one. And he's got his knees drawn up to him. And he's got his head in between his knees. So he's got his arms around his knees and his head down. And I look, and he looks up at me. I'm like, Carlos? And all of a sudden, beams of light shot out of him. One grabbed me right here, and the other one grabbed me at the solar plexus. So there was like two whips that came out of him and just connected to me. And he just slid off the edge of this corridor platform, just into the void. And as he was doing that, I started getting pulled along the edge of the long corridor, and then I went over it. So I'm following him. He's out in front of me. And I remember him going up and over a hill in space. I don't really know how to explain this other than imagine that, there's not actually a mountain that's made of matter, but like a mountain in space where you could be very close to something, but you can't see it. You got to go up and over like a bend in space. And it was like we were following this bend in space and it comes over the hill. And all of a sudden in front of me are these portals. They're like wormholes and they're turning. There's two giant ones and there's a bunch of light, little beings of light. That's what I figured they were. Consciousness, little beings of light passing from one little wormhole portal into the other. It was just constant flow going from the big one to the big one. And there were all sorts of other smaller little wormhole portals. And they were all just kind of in a row in this space, almost like the cosmic Grand Central Station. And I see Carlos dip down, and I'm thinking, oh, we're going to go into this flow. And he goes down below it. And there's all these medium-sized ones. And I figured, oh, he's going to go in one of those. And he ducks behind. So they're all kind of like in the same place, different sizes. And the big one has most of the lights going back and forth. Some other ones have some lights going back and forth. But he ducks down behind and goes actually behind where all these openings are. And there's a really small opening sitting down there. And he just goes right into it. And I go in with him. And the minute I hit the kind of like the portal of that wormhole, if you will, it's like everything just sped up to where I was seeing like things going by me. I imagine they were probably stars, maybe even galaxies. I don't know. Just flying by me. And Carlos keeps going. Then he drops into this hole. I just see him drop. And so I'm coming up to it, and the cord that he was holding me with were severed. And I just kind of floated with the momentum I had left. And I go up right to where he dropped in, and I land in, it was like a round window, but it was, what is that, concave? So it was outward, so like a bubble. And I ended up landing in it. And I look in there, and he's in this room. And he's sitting next to Don Juan, his teacher, on the couch. And I'm sitting up there. I couldn't get into it, but I could definitely see everything in the room. I could actually even feel it, if that makes any sense. I could feel through that bubble. And those two were talking and pointing up at me. And at one point, I must have like smashed my face against the window kind of thing, because they just pointed and started laughing hysterically at me. So they're laughing, and I can't really I can't really understand what they're saying. It's not like I can hear their voices. And I could just see this exchange between them. So I started looking around the room they were in. And it was very interesting because it was like the floor was alive. I don't know how else to put it. It was like whatever that scene was, life was in every part of it. It was in the floor. It's like the lamp they were sitting under was giving off like sunshine, like living, vibrant energy of sunshine. The couch was like embracing them, like it was in on their conversation. It was a very strange kind of feeling I was having. And there was a bookshelf behind him, and there was books lining the wall. And I would look at a book and just see what the title was. And there would be this connection where it was telling me what it was. It was like the book itself was telling me what the book was about. And so I looked at him for a while. And I mean, it was a very, very amazing experience. And there was a more of a presence in that space. I felt like Carlos was showing me a destination or a map of some sort to, a state of being that goes beyond the physical. Because it truly was. They looked physical, but it was beyond that. It was something more luminescent about it, something more vibrant, fully more alive. Mind you, this is not under the influence of anything. This was stone cold sober going to bed. And I see them point at me, and I hear Carlos tell me, you need to go back. You need to go back. You don't have enough energy to stay here. And all of a sudden, it was like a magnet pulled me back through that portal, and then back to where I could see all of the little wormhole portals, back onto the platform of the corridor, and then back into my body. And I just sat up and just was completely stunned. Just completely stunned. It was such a real experience that all the criteria to tell you that was actually happening was happening. So, it's a real experience. I mean, it's not something that has any value in this world necessarily, but it definitely has value in the presence of the being, and it truly had that for me. So I wake up the next morning and I go outside, and there's a baby crow, which that is a big part of those books. The crow is a big player in Carlos's books, especially with Don Juan. There was a baby crow sitting on a little chair out on the front porch. And I went and sat in it. It just sat there, and it sat there the whole day. And, it kind of made me feel a little bit better. And then I had talked to this friend of mine, Chip, who will be on the podcast. He's 77 now. He lives in the Four Corners, but we're going to get him on here as a guest. But I had called him because, I just needed someone to talk to that was an elder. It wasn't really anything I could bounce off my family or friends. And I knew Chip would understand. He had been a dear friend of mine for quite a while and really helped me out a lot when I was young, especially when I lived out in Cortez and did all that. And so I called him and I said, I really don't know what to do. He says, well, just go to Ash, I guess. I mean, that's pretty much where he was taking you. You might as well finish the process of going to Ash and see what rises out of that. And then shortly thereafter, my wife approached me, my ex-wife approached me and told me that she was pregnant with her second daughter. And so we ended up moving back to Dolores, where my friend Chip lived, and spent time there. About 1998, I started doing speaking engagements in Colorado Springs, Durango, pretty much all over, and did it for quite a while. Did it until about 2012, pretty regularly. Had a really good time with that, really kind of, did some things, so to speak. They were exciting. And, I'll be doing more of that here in the future as well. But after Carlos passed away, it was really rough for me. It really was, because there was this kind of thing going on where I knew what he was presenting me was real. And I knew it was important. And I knew that if I was ever going to, have peace or any sense of freedom within this being, no matter what's going on, have a sense of energetic presence, of the power to do things in my life, of, being able to be physically, well, mentally well, sharp, aware, I knew there was value in that, but I hadn't completely purged my desire for worldly things. So it was a clash, and it was not an easy one. It landed me in a lot of really, really bad positions. It was interesting because as much as I adored Carlos and adored what he taught me, it ran counter to being able to make money and pay rent and get job and hold down house and have kids. And So, it was a rough go, and I did the best I could. No one got hurt. Kids grew up just fine. They're now 23 and 26, and great, well-adjusted women in the world, take care of themselves. I ask them if they need anything. They tell me nothing. I don't need anything. So, it was hard to maintain a level of integrity with the daily world and immersing myself in this material that Carlos had left with me that I had to unpack. And it's taken a long time. I mean, I'm now 52, so that was 25 years ago since he passed away. And that whole time, those 2.5 decades, it was a grind. Honestly, it was a grind. I would find myself trying to use energy in a way that would benefit me here, benefit some aspect of myself, the identity. And it would always go sideways on me. I would end up with migraines just out of nowhere that would just be crushing, soul crushing. Strokes, a few of those, heart attacks, a little bit of what the hell's going on? And I never went to the doctor for any of this because I kind of understood what was going on. I mean, I think there's a certain point on the journey of consciousness you realize there are rules here. There are rules on this planet. There are laws, so to speak, not written by men, but energetic laws. And the way you know if you've broke them is the energy inside of you will go a little south, go a little sideways on you, cause a little bit of neuroses or, need for catharsis, some kind of something. It's just has that capability. So, working these things out and trying to get to a place where I could truly feel like the thing that's looking at my eyeballs was not being corrupted by this identity that I carried around. And that was a long haul. So yeah, I went through that. And, a lot of this we'll be talking about in future podcasts. When we do a particular topic, I'll bring a lot of this into it, what went on in those. But, just a general thing. But, it has been difficult. I have to say the last, 7-8 years has been a lot easier for me because I've been able to drop things. Carlos always told me, Cristobal, you're trying to be 80. You're trying to know what an 80-year-old knows. You're 25. You're not even out of diapers yet. In order for you to know what an 80-year-old knows, you got to live another 55 years. It's like, just make sure you do live, and I've definitely done that. And I've come to the place where I think I understand on a deeper level what it is that is causing us to feel out of sorts, out of odds, in conflict with ourselves, within ourselves, with the world around us, and maintain a strong connection to what's looking out of my eyeballs, to, what's making us, to what's beating the heart, and understand that, and understand the language of it, because it's definitely energetic. It's not mind. It's not thought. It doesn't come that way. It comes as energy, and we have to be, let's just say, consciously evolved enough to be able to decipher the energetic presence, to understand what's in front of us. What is this? What's being laid out in front of us, and how do we approach it? So we don't go south with our energy. We don't get depleted. That we make sure that we're not getting into delusion, because delusion leads to madness. To stay sane, to stay free within the body, within the consciousness. So, in about 10 years ago, plant medicines came back into my life. Like I had said, when I was Carlos, we didn't do that. There was no plant medicines in my past, obviously. If you watch the first episode, there was plenty of that. So I'm about 30 years old, and it's my birthday, and I go out to this town called Cripple Creek, which is up here by us. That's where we were working at the time, working jobs. And I'm walking out the door of a casino up there that I worked in. And I'm walking down the street, and there's a guy walking up the street. And we kind of exchanged glances. And, it was pretty energetic. I could tell, yeah, this guy's kind of native going on. He's got that native vibe. I've been around it enough. And so we just kind of keep walking, acknowledge each other. And all of a sudden he says, hey, hey. And I turn around. He's like, come here. So I walk up to him. And he says, hey, what are you doing tonight? I said, nothing. It's my birthday. I don't have any plans. He's like, well, I'm having a peyote ceremony tonight. I want you to come. His name was Jaime. He was a Huicho from Mexico, from down in Chihuahua, and which is a part of Mexico. And so I ended up going there for the night, which the interesting part was when I was with Carlos one day off in the woods, he had some property that he had given to this lady and her husband, and he had a cabin on it, no power, nothing, had a hand pump well, had a little outhouse out back. Nice place, built well, but yeah, it was his little cabin, and he bought him this property and said, hey, I'll give you this property. I just want my cabin. I don't want anybody to bother. And he had his books in there. He was quite the book collector. Well, anyway, at that place, the Volvo, he used to drive Don Juan around in the books. So when you read the books, he's driving Don Juan around in this old Volvo, and it's parked out there. I'm like, is that the Volvo? So I go down to it, and I open the trunk, and it's full of peyote buttons. And he goes, no. I went to grab him, and he, slapped my hand and said, no, you put that back. And he shuts it. He's like, you're not allowed to do that. And I said, why not? He's like, you can do that when you're 30. When you're 30, you can do that because then maybe you'll want to know how to live right. And that's what that is for. It teaches you how to live. I said, oh. So it was kind of interesting that on my 30th birthday, I meet this guy, Jaime, and we go to this peyote ceremony. And I remember being in that. It was really interesting. Because, when I was with the native guys in my earlier days, we did ceremony, but there was no plants involved. You were doing pipe ceremony, you were doing sweat ceremonies, you were doing vision quests, you were doing warriors walk, and, sun dances, those kinds of things. But there was no plants involved. Tobacco, obviously, but, a little weed here and there. I mean, the elders never knew, but us kids were definitely doing, us younger folk were definitely doing that once in a while. But there wasn't anything really going on in that way. And when I did that, I did it on my own, away from that group. I was still using it at the time, but not in that context. I was always by myself. And so after, when I met Carlos, he said, yeah, no more plants. You're done with plants for a while. And, and I did. I stayed done with them for quite a while until that peyote ceremony when I was 30. It was very cool. I walk in there, do the whole thing. There's a whole setup. You make these rattles, you make these fans. There's a whole ceremony before the ceremony. And then, you get this handful of peyote powder, and he just mounted it in my hands and had to eat that. I had to eat a few of those throughout the night. And I remember just sitting there, wrenching in the gut, because just gut wrenching. And just kind of suffering, like, oh, geez, what am I doing? What am I doing? And everybody else there, they're doing the same thing. And all of a sudden I go through this kind of, it was like there was a male voice there saying, you need to let go. You need to let go. And I remember saying, of what? And it was like I went into my guts that were just like dry heave, wrenching, turned in knots. And I started seeing like behaviors from my past, the more nefarious things. I was never a dangerous guy. I was never like really, not violent. I don't have a criminal record, nothing like that. But, just a little nefarious in the world, so to speak. And a lot of this was coming up, just a lot of it. And it's like, you need to let go of that. You need to let go of that. And I walked outside and I said, how do I let go of that? And it was like, it said, I'll help you. And something punched me in the solar plexus really hard. And I just projectile vomited. And it was weird because as I was doing that, all this emotion was coming out with it. All this like past, like crud was coming with it. And I could just feel it like coming out of my brain, coming out of my body, coming out of my heart, out of my lungs, and just left it there. And I walked back in, I sat down, and I was awake. It was, I was definitely under the influence of peyote, but I was awake. I could see everything happening. I was tuned in. It was like there was a teaching going on. As long as I sat there still without thinking, it was very obvious. Sometimes I get a little distracted and it would turn into a whisper. And then I'd always, hear this, come back, and I would come back to it. You're 12 hours sitting in a TV, it's kind of hard to stay, focused for 12 hours, especially, 30 and with no real experience in staying focused other than what I got from Carlos, which was more about awareness. I had no energy to focus. So, it was just about building awareness so I could see where I was wasting my energy so I could get enough to focus it. Took a long time. So I'm sitting there and I notice that everybody else is still on the floor and they're writhing in pain. Just, because it's pretty painful. And I look behind me and he looks over at me. He's like, "Oh, welcome to the ceremony." And I said, "Well, thank you." And he's like, "Yeah, they haven't made it here yet. They're still dealing with some things. They're not showing up yet." So it was me and Jaime sitting in this, heavenly state. It truly was beautiful. It's like you were connected to the earth. You were. You already are. You were aware of it. And being aware of it means you could pay attention to it, which means you can amplify it. And so it was being amplified. And he's singing the peyote songs. He's got this rattle in his drum. It's a do-do-do-do-do-do-do. And he's, singing through these chants they do in the peyote ceremonies. A couple other people came through about 4 hours later. Another one maybe 6 hours later. And about 10 hours into it, everybody kind of came into it, a few hours before it was over. And they were exhausted. They were really exhausted. And that was my reintroduction into plants. I did them off and on from there, peyote ceremonies. Sat with, some Navajos, sat with some Lakota, did that kind of thing for a little while. And kind of still raising kids. So, there wasn't too much. I couldn't get out as much as I could before I had kids. So, just holding the line, learning as much as I could every day, trying to stay aware, trying to stay conscious, trying to see my behaviors and see if there was a way to right the wrong ones. Even just psychological behavior. Really trying to figure out what that was really all about. It was really important if I was going to live a life and not be a train wreck. I kind of needed that, configured in the right way. So, and just kind of work towards that, all the while doing speaking engagements and all the while still suffering. There's the speaking engagements are on YouTube. I think it's under a page called Nawal's Landing at the moment. But there's it's back 10, 12 years ago at this point. Yeah, 10, 12 years ago. It's old stuff. It's still good, but, even in that time, there was a lot going on that was hard for me. Just a lot of hard stuff. A lot of Don Juan talks about this thing in his book. It's called Losing the Human Form. And, Carlos describes his going through that. He said, he even told me, he's like, "Yeah, I thought I should go to the hospital about 100 times in a couple of years. It just felt like something was wrong." And Don Juan would always tell him, no, you're losing the human form. That's what happens. It's almost like it's like a metamorphosis. It's kind of like, maybe the way to look at it is a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. That caterpillar doesn't stay a caterpillar and grow wings. It goes to mush and then grows wings. And, we get to feel that in our bodies. It's like we're releasing energies out of the body that are no longer part of a newer configuration that, is seeking to advance along the conscious path through, this infinite cosmos. And there's not, some don't want to do it. But those that do and really apply themselves, there is definitely a purging of the insides, so to speak. Not necessarily is it coming, it's not a thing in the body necessarily. It's a thing in the energy field, and the body is a projection of that energy field. So what's going on in the energy field goes on in the body. So when the energy field's going to put itself back into symmetry, because, things get out of whack, right? And that's where the energy is low in the body. But once the symmetry is returned back to integrity, then the body has the energy back. And you just clean everything out. So, a lot of these things, I never went to the doctor, and was sick for quite a while. A lot of just strange sicknesses would come out of nowhere. And, just avoided the doctor. I would always go into silence with the migraines. And if I sat Indian style and tilted my head back, I could just be out of my body enough to not feel pain. But there would be this voice there. And it was definitely more purging, purge more, purge more. And I guess I realized at that point, it's like, if there's past lives, I was an asshole in so many of them. Because, wow, that just felt like, purging just crap for a very long time. So a woman, I was at one speaking engagement. And this is the one that really kind of launched what I've been doing for the last decade. That's why I'm going here. We get to the last decade, we'll be caught up, and then we can start getting into content because the topics we're going to do, because that's what I'm mainly interested in, is getting into that stuff. But for the sake of you getting to know a little bit more about me, I don't know if this is disclosure enough, but it's what I got for now. So I'm doing a speaking engagement in Colorado Springs, Colorado. This woman walks by the windows and stops and looks in the windows. And is looking right at me, and I'm sitting at this desk waiting for the rest of the people to file in and sit down so we can get started. And she comes right in the door, walks right up to the desk I was sitting at, and puts her hands down on it pretty matter-of-factly, and leans in and looks at me. And she says, "You're one of them." I said, "Excuse me?" She says, "You're one of them." I'm like, "One of who?" And she's like, What are you about to do here? And I said, "Oh, I'm doing a speaking engagement." She's like, "On what?" I said, "Well, the only thing I ever talk about, consciousness, and the things about consciousness and the hindrances to full consciousness and how we can, deal with that in a way that, is kind of ours, not borrowed from some other country where we mess it up and don't actually understand what it's about. Something we can use. I'm really been interested in that." She's like, "Huh, do you mind if I stay?" I said, No, you take a seat." So she sits down, and we go through the whole night, a couple hours, 3 or 4, actually. We get through the end of the evening, and she walks up to me, and she goes, "You definitely are one of them." I said, "Okay, what are we talking about?" She's like, "Well, what are you doing tomorrow?" I said, "Well, nothing. I don't have any plans, and I got a day off, so I'm going to be at home." She's like, "Well, where do you live?" And I said, "I live in Manitou Springs, off Washington Street." She says, "Huh, I just rented a room off Washington Street. I'll come over tomorrow about noon. Is that okay with you?" I said, "Yeah." So she comes over to my house around noon. And she walks in the door, and she's got her purse on her. She sits down at the table. And she just looks at me. She says, "Oh, by the way, I have something for you," and reaches into the purse and pulls out these 2 brown bottles. They're about that tall. And puts them out in front of me. I said, "What's that?" She goes, "That's Huachuma." I said, "Oh, San Pedro." She's like, "Yeah, this is from Peru. And I want you to have them. And I want you to, I want you to work with that." And I'm like, "What are we talking about here?" She's like, just, "I want you to do this. You're one of them. You're one." And I'm like, "What do you keep talking? Why do you keep saying that?" She's like, "Just do this. Just do this." It was very strange. There was other things said, but it's basically, that's the run of it. And so me and my ex-wife and my children were just getting ready to move up the mountains out of Manitou, because it was kind of in a city town on the edge of Colorado Springs before you go up in the mountains. And we were moving into this little village, really. It was a cool little house up against Pikes Peak, waterfalls behind it. And so I have those 2 brown bottles. It was like a week later. So we get moved in, and, it's fall, but it's still warm out. And she comes over, and we're talking. And she's like, "I want you to drink that and then go be by yourself for the day." So I'm like, "All right," and I take both of them, and I drink the first one, and then I drink the second one. I figured, if we're going to do this, let's do this. And go walk up the hill, and I sit down. And I'm sitting there, and it was the most interesting thing I had ever experienced outside of my time with, the master, Carlos, the master, on my own. I'm sitting there, and, I'm in that medicine, and it is beautiful. There's no stomach problems. I'm just in this really beautiful space. And all of a sudden, I look to my side, and it's like the scenery is jiggling and wiggling and kind of vibrating, right? Just like a little patch of the scenery, like the tree I'm sitting next to is vibrating. And I peer over there, and I peer into that. And all of a sudden, there's like a hole, and I see this dude sitting there through the hole, and he's about 5'2", 3" maybe. He's very dark red, So like he's definitely Peruvian from the mountain. He kind of looked like the Caro Indians up in the mountains of Peru. And but yeah, really, really old looking. Really, and he's wearing, like a bandana, and he's got these kind of khakis on that kind of have these moving patterns on it. And he's sitting there, and he says to me, and I could hear him, "Pull me through." I'm like, "Pull you through?" He's like, "Yeah, pull me through." So I just kind of look at that portal, and all of a sudden, he's sitting next to me, and that portal closes, and he's sitting there right next to me, and it's very interesting, like tactile. He's sitting next to me. And I look over at him, and he's like, "Just focus straight ahead. Just focus straight ahead." So I did, and he's kind of backs up a little bit, so he's out of my periphery. And I'm just focusing straight ahead, and I see these beings moving through the woods. They didn't have form. They were, inorganic beings is what they were. They had no organic composition, but they could move. They were moving through the woods, and they were clearly, I could see the patterns of energy moving through the woods. Reminds me of the movie The Predator. When the Predator would go into that stealth mode, it would be like an energy field just running, moving around. And that's what I was seeing, and they were coming from all directions. And I got a little frightened. I'm like, "What is this?" I'm like, "Are you still there?" And he just kind of leaned forward just enough where I could see that he was still there, and then he backed up. And then he got up and he grabbed the top of my head. And it was interesting because I could feel hands on my head. Clearly felt hands on my head. And he would turn. It was like he was turning my head, but my head wasn't turning. It was like a series of lenses. And it's like click, click, click. And all of a sudden, I see these bands of energy wrapping around me. I'm kind of in the center of it. And they're about 16-foot diameter around me. And there's just bands of energy, all the colors of the rainbow. So, all the colors of energy, all the colors of light were in these big bands and vibrating and making these patterns. And he said, "Watch closely, watch closely." So I'm sitting there staring at him. I can still see these beings with their energetic patterns and no bodies, mingling around, moving closer to me. And they would step into these bands of energy that were like 6 foot thick by this time. And when they stepped into the energy, it wrapped them. So it was like they had form. And they were all the colors of that energy, and these patterns would start to undulate. And they had eyes and noses and mouths and headdresses and hands and feet and legs. And I could see them. They were bunches of them just kind of leaning in at me. And I just felt like, like a quickening, like an energy racing up and down my spine, and a very beautiful presence and a ton of energy. And they all had these little cubes. And they all would amass these cubes together, and then one of them just shoved it at me. And when it shoved it at me, it's like I kind of saw blinding light. And then I'm sitting back on the rock, everything fades, and now there's these temples in front of me. These, like Incan temples all over. And it was like I was in them. It's like I could go up and touch them. They weren't fractal. They weren't moving. They were solid. And I kept seeing these patterns on them. And the guy sitting next to me, who's grandfather Wachuma, that is the medicine spirit of that cactus, was describing to me these patterns. And I said, "What is this?" And he's like, it's the link to the road. He just kept saying, "It's the link to the road." I said, "What road?" And then at that point, it's like he put his hand on top of my head and just kind of blew on me. And now I'm standing on this long dirt road. It's just straight. And it, goes up and down hills, but it's just straight. And then there's these big, giant thorn bushes on the side. And I'm standing there on it, and he's standing next to me, and I felt well-being like I've never known it. Like I have never known. I felt clear. I felt like everything was just fine. I could stand on that road forever, and it would be I felt awesome. And I asked him, "Where are we? What is this?" He's like, "This is Spirit Road." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "This is what you were always meant to walk. This is what everyone's meant to walk." And I'm like, huh. And it didn't dawn on me to say, well, it's kind of boring. It's just a dirt road, because there was nothing boring about it. It was very enlivening. Like my life force was just doubling up and doubling up. And so we're sitting there, And all of a sudden, out of the bramble bush, like these tall thorn bushes, thick, thick, thick on the side, these little shadowy things would come out. And as they would come out, the road in front of me would distort, and I wouldn't really feel as good. And everything would just get kind of out of whack. And he would just do this. And it was like they'd all jump back in the bushes and it would be clear again. I said, well, what's that? He's like, oh, those are the things that entice you. I'm like, excuse me? He's like, they'll come in to entice you with thoughts and distortions. I'm like, how do you get rid of them? He's like, just like that. Back in the bushes. I said, well, what happens if you go into the bush? What happens if you get pulled into there? He's like, well, take a look, right? And I find myself going into it. And it's just all the chaos of a daily life, completely unconscious. Yeah, we all know what that is. We all know what that is. Just completely, just madness, chaos, and no energy and no presence, and just like running a tape, playing out a role, but no real satisfaction coming from it, just doing more and more. And I'm like, and I jump out. More like he pulls me out. Right? And he's like, that, see? I'm like, wow, that is mesmerizing. Is that what's happening? He's like, yep. People keep getting pulled off of the trajectory of spirit into these other avenues that the world that's made by man drags them into. And he told me, this is what you focus on. You got to keep it simple. Yeah? So I go through this whole experience. Mind-blowing, 8 hours. And I come walking down the hill. It's starting to get dark. And there's this woman. I don't want to use her name because I don't want to out her in any way. She might not want anyone to know. So anyway, she's sitting at the house and I come down. She's like, yep, you definitely are one of them. And I said, what? And she looks at me. She goes, look at yourself. And I look down and I have all these patterns on my skin. It's like they're just like these glowing patterns. I was stunned. I'm like, wow, felt really cool, right? And she says to me, she's like, so have you ever tried ayahuasca? I'm like, no, I've heard of it and I've been interested in it, but no. And this is, before, it's a big deal, I mean, as big of a deal as it is now. I mean, it's been a big deal for a while, but this is before it's gotten really super huge. And she says, you need to drink ayahuasca. I'm like, okay. She's like, we got to figure out a way to get some ayahuasca. And I have no idea. I mean, how do you get ayahuasca? I mean, that's from, somewhere else. So anyway, at this time, I was running this page called The Path with Heart on Facebook. It was like a Facebook group. And I was kind of, participating in some way with that. And I had created it and started it. And, I kind of lost interest in it after a while. It's not like much goes on those things. Most of those pages, they don't. It's just, not really my cup of tea anymore. I'll go on there once in a while for sure. But I go on there, and at the time I was really posting on it a lot. And there's a message that pops up. It's from a man named Ronald Wheelock, who is known as the Gringo Shaman of Peru. He's great. Let's put it this way. There's a lot to be said about him. There's a lot of people who say negative things about him. But I have visited him I went to Peru and visited him in the jungle and sat with him, and there is value to what he does. There is a whole lot of value to what he does. So those of you that are in that ayahuasca world, in that medicine community, whatever you call that thing, that know of him, he's considered a madman. He definitely pushes the limits and the edges like no one I've ever seen. It's dangerous, but there's definitely a benefit to the darkness he shoves you into, because he does. It just shoves you into the darkness. He holds you in it. But there's something to be learned there. It's like staring into the abyss, having it stare back, and learning how not to flinch. It's kind of how I would put it. So you could face the more darker aspects of yourself when you go in to figure out, how to deal with these things in you that cause you into depression and anxiety and fear and rage and anger and, hopelessness, how you can deal with those things. So you definitely had some benefit. But anyway, I was running this page and all of a sudden there's a message that pops up on the messenger. It's from Ron Wheelock. I'm like, I didn't even know who he was. I mean, I'd seen maybe something about him, but I didn't know who he was. And he was talking about, hey, I've been reading your Path with Heart page, and the Carlos, because that you knew Carlos, it's really cool. And he's like, I really am enjoying it. I'm like, well, thank you. He's like, have you ever tried ayahuasca? I said, no, I have not. He's like, huh, I'm gonna get you some. So 2 weeks later, there's ayahuasca at my house. So me and this lady and two friends of mine, my wife at the time, go down in the basement and we drink ayahuasca. The first night I drank ayahuasca was interesting. I just kept saying, I'm home. This is home. Wherever this is home for me. I feel home. I feel like I'm home. It was beautiful. It was a wonderful experience. Awesome. Didn't have Icaros, didn't have a shaman there. I found some Icaros on the internet and just played those through a speaker. It's not like we were, really in a ceremony at all. It was an introduction. And it was beautiful. Like I said, I felt like it was home. And, I felt this feminine presence come in. It was kind of ethereal. I mean, it was a little not so intense that first night, but I could feel it. I'm like, oh, that's what they called Mother Ayahuasca. I could kind of feel her presence. I could see her moving around like a giant serpent through the space we were in. Just because it's, the room's not there anymore. You're somewhere else. And so I came out of that, and she says, okay, we're going to do it again. So we do it again the following night. It's not the same thing that time. That time got dark immediately, just extremely dark. It was like, whoa, what is this? Just like you're in a Baroque demon circus, basically. It was just all these faces and ugly shit everywhere, just everywhere. And I'm sitting in it, and, I'm huffing and puffing. I'm nauseous. I'm sweating. It's like my body is contorting in weird ways. And at this time, I don't have any idea what any of this is, what's going on at all. It just feels like your rib cage is being splayed open, or you're being wrung out like a towel. And I'm in it, and it's dark and it's hard. It's really hard. Just trying to breathe through it. And you got all this kind of negativity just coming up and just barreling on you. It's like, and then you got those demonic faces coming in and barreling down on you. It's all like turning you inside out. And I'm just sitting there nauseous, just wanting to just puke. I didn't puke the first night. And I'm sitting there. And all of a sudden, I see this woman come through it all. It's like she just moves through all the demonic faces. They all part. She walks right up to me. She's got long gray hair. She's holding a broom. She's got like this kind of dress-like thing on. And she looks at me and asks me, do you know who I am? I said, are you Mother Ayahuasca? She says, yes, I need to show you something. I'm like, huh? And she's like, come with me. I need to show you something. And I pass out. I mean, I hit the floor. I just hit the floor. And all of a sudden, I'm in my 8-year-old body again. And it's like I'm 8 years old. And we're in this scene of my life. My house that I lived in Omaha, Nebraska, growing up as a kid, we had a finished basement and Atari and air hockey and all that. And all the kids in the neighborhood would come to our house. And my parents were out for the night. And my sisters were somewhere else. And there was a kid in the neighborhood. He's dead now. Guess he committed suicide. At least I think that's what I heard. There was a kid in the neighborhood. I won't mention his name. It's not important. The story's more important than the name. That was over at the house. He was 21 years old. And my sisters, like I said, they were out doing something. And so me and some friends of mine in the neighborhood were at the house. And, I'm standing there in the staircase. I completely remember this. The minute it started, I was like, I remember this night. I'm like, so I wonder what she wants to show me, because I didn't really ever see anything about it. And he goes downstairs, and Tim, the guy is there. His name's Tim. And he's, mingling around the kids. And I look over, and he leans over and farts in the kids' faces. They were sitting on the couch. He would just fart in their faces. I'm like, why are you showing me this? This doesn't seem like it's anything important. Yeah, I remember that. She's like, well, you need to look again. And when she said that, it's like all the hair on the back of my neck stood up. And I was frozen, like paralyzed, frozen. I was like, scared. I didn't know why, but it was like I was trembling. And she's like, look, look, look. And I took everything I had to look. And I look over, and he's not farting in their faces, although that was a memory I had. He's molesting them. Not heavy duty molesting. I mean, not like full blown. But yeah, definitely things are going on there that ought not to. And it was like I lost my breath. And I just looked at this woman standing in front of me. I told her, what do you do? Why are you fucking with me? You're fucking with me. This did not happen. This did not happen. You're fucking with me. I don't like this anymore. I don't know who you are. You seem like the devil. What are you doing to me? And she's like, this did happen. You need to accept that this happened. And she's like, let me show you some other things. And it was like, it was interesting. It was like, I went into this, like a review of that time period in my life. And all of the indicators that, yeah, this actually was going on with quite a few kids in the neighborhood, no adult knew. The only adults that actually knew, there was a friend of mine, Craig Nelson. He lived down the street from me. We did BMX bikes. We used to build BMX trails, do all that. So we were never in the house, always up doing something, with the kids in the neighborhood. But me and him hung out the most. And we had made these plans on a Friday night that Saturday morning we're going to get up and go work on our little BMX track. I mean, we would buy trophies, invite kids to go do races, just do our own thing there. It's quite fun. And that Saturday morning we would wake up and go do that. And come about 8 o'clock in the morning, have some breakfast, and go head to the little field that we had our track in and go work on it. So it's like 6 o'clock. I go home. And I get up in the morning. I go over to his house. All the furniture's gone. There's no one in it. And I look in the windows. It's like the whole house is cleared out. And I'm like, what the hell? They had moved in the middle of the night. Didn't tell anybody. So during this kind of reviewing of that time period, ayahuasca showed me that she said, and Craig got it the worst. And when she said that, it's like all those memories flooded back. She says his parents found out, but they couldn't bring themselves. They were too embarrassed, so they just left town, didn't tell anyone. So, and there were some kids in the neighborhood. There was one night we're sitting on my front porch, and this guy is driving back from his job. He used to work at a Quick Stop, which was down the road, but he lived, just in a cul-de-sac right off the side of me. And he was riding home back to his parents' house, and there was a bunch of us kids sitting on the front porch. And we all kind of looked at each other, and we went and jumped him. We jumped him, knocked him off his bike, we're kicking him, punching him, hitting him. No one said anything. I mean, we just kind of did this. We went back and sat down on the porch, and, we're like, yeah, we got him. But no one understood why. It wasn't like anybody said anything. Like, yeah, he's not going to do that to us again. None of that. There was no talk. It was just kind of weird. We're like, wow, that was kind of odd. We did it. We wanted to do it. And then she showed me his life, the guy that was molesting the kids. She showed me his life, what he went through, right? And the demon thing that was in him. Because I would look up and just see this demon face. It was horrible. And after a while, I realized that I'm not being messed with, but I'm really stunned. It's like, how did I forget this? And I looked at her and said, what? How come I don't remember any of this? She's like, that's what I want to show you. She takes her hands, and it's like she had like claws in a way. And she just grabbed the scene and ripped it open. And this Leviathan comes out from this little rift she makes. And the minute it comes into the room, I could feel it in my guts. I could feel it in my body. It is horrendous. It is vile. It is disgusting. I could tell that it was manipulating my behavior for so many years without me ever knowing it. And I could feel all this going on. And it was scary. I was like, what in the hell? And this Leviathan is it's like a serpent, but it has the top part of its body, the end of it where the head is, goes into like an alligator, and it had this snout, like an alligator snout. And it had these deep sunken eye sockets, but red bulging eyes, but it had human lips. And it would just sit there and just quiver its lips. It was the most disgusting feeling. So it's swimming around the space we're in. And I'm just nauseous as can be. And she's like, I want you to see it. I want you to see it. I'm like, I don't want to look at that. Just whatever, however we get rid of that, just please get that thing out of. She says, you have to look at it first. And it got right up in my face. It was like right here. And just going with its lips, and it pulled its mouth back, kind of quivered back. There were just rows of sharp teeth, and I felt just terror, like my soul stripped and just terror to my bones. And then I feel someone grab me and start wringing me out, like taking a towel and wringing it out. And as it's going, it's like I'm feeling all this pressure in my body. My head just goes swelling into pressure. And then it's like all the energy, I had my eyes closed and all the energy is turning in on itself. And all of a sudden I just puked right into this bucket. And as I'm doing that, I felt someone behind me yank this thing out of me. And I felt free. Like, oh my God. It was the scariest thing to go through, but at the other side of it, it was like, bing, 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 all lights are on, all systems go, things are sharp. I could see the behavior it influenced, and I just watched it just dissolve and go away. And this thing is, still in the room swimming around. And I watch her take it by the tail, and she just hurls it, and it hits like a barrier somewhere. Not that you could see it, but there was a barrier. And it hits it and just blows into a bunch of little, like rainbow particles just spread out through space. And went into this deep, 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 deep place for about 10 hours. I was just laying on the floor, just twitching, like a fish out of water, twitching. I went through some things there. I don't want to get into that because it won't make any sense to anybody. It was my own meeting with, people I had worked with in lives, so to speak, and this one as well. But it's not really pertinent to it. So that's the second night. It comes over. I am astonished. It is really mind-blowing. The next weekend, we go in again. And that third night, I go to drink that cup, and oh my God, I drink it. I'm like, what did I just do? What did I just do? And none of this is going on. It wasn't dark. It was, it was nice, pleasant visions going on. And all of a sudden, Mother Ayahuasca comes walking in. It's for me, that's what it's like. She's just standing there. I could see her, fully present. She looks at me. She's like, you don't seem to be enjoying your visions. I said, no, this is good. This is good. It's not as hairy as the second night, thank God. She's like, no, you don't really seem to be enjoying your visions. I said, no, this is great. She says, no. She's like, hey, would you rather work? And it was weird. I didn't even think about it. She said, yes. And she kind of says, follow me. And again, with the hands and the claws, rips open a space, and we dive into this abyss. Into an abyss. And it is dark. There is things running amok. Jokers running all over the place with their beady little eyes and evil little stares and little weirdo clown. All the things, And I'm watching this happen. And suddenly we're in like neighborhoods. Where? I don't know. Walking into houses. And she's like, we need to clean this house. And we go in, and there'd be a woman laying there on the couch suffering. And I could see all these like shadowy things piled up on her, just consuming her energy. And she's just sobbing in, desperation and despair, just laying there on the couch. And she's like, clean her out. And it was interesting. I just went up, was hovering over her and pulling things out of her. Just pulling things. We did this all night long. From person, I don't know any of these people. We just go from house to house pulling things out of people, right? Do this all night long. And we get back to the room where the ceremony's going on, or where we're drinking the ayahuasca. Come back into the room, and I'm feeling pretty good, a little tired, but pretty good. And she said, you need to get yourself an ally. You're going to do this work, and you need to get yourself an ally. I'm like, okay. And I go to bed, wake up the next morning. And I'm thinking about that. What does she mean by an ally? And what does she mean by this work? So this path lights up through the woods. I'm sitting there just in the back porch. And I just see this path light up through the woods. I get up and I just start walking it. And it's just like, wow, this is cool. Still kind of in that medicine. It doesn't wear off. very easily, very soon. You can still be in it. If you don't waste your energy, you can stay in that state of heightened consciousness that it provides for quite a while. And so I'm following this, and I figure that's, definitely how this all kind of transpired. But it's just meandering like a mile through the woods. It's not on a trail. It's just meandering around. I'm just kind of walking in it. And all of a sudden it ends at this pile of rocks, like a big rock outcropping. And that rock outcropping is just glowing. So I climb over the top of it, and I look down, and there's a dead bear laying there. Been dead for a little while. But it's definitely an adult. And, so I get its claws, and I get its skull. I bury the rest of it. I take the skull and the claws, and I go home. And I clean the skull off, and I clean the claws off, and I put it in on, my little altar in the room we're doing this in. And the next time we drink ayahuasca, we go in, and I turned into that bear. It was like I turned into a bear. It was like a full transformation. And went in with Mother Ayahuasca and took on demons all night. I mean, that's the best I could say. I know it sounds fantastic and wow, that's fantasy and you were hallucinating and all that. No, we were taking on negative energies that I had in the medicine. There, it's like they're wearing a persona, so you can see them. Here we just get these thoughts in our head. And it's like, where's that coming from? Or we just get afraid in our room, or we feel like there's something in there, but we can't see it. In the medicine, you see what that is. So I could see it. I could see all of them. And just basically hunted all night long. And from there, just kept working with it. Other friends would come in. It started getting, big. Started having more people come in. And did that for quite a while. So basically, I spent the next decade working with ayahuasca. Pretty exclusively, matter of fact. I mean, there were other plants involved in the ceremonies, but we were holding ceremonies as, thought I'd take people down to the jungle. We took people to Ronweelok. That was an interesting experience. A couple of hospital rides to the hospital for people. Me, one night, almost died there. That was interesting. So I went there, and then from there we ended up going to Pucallpa, where through a friend of mine I got to meet a man by the name of Enrique. He runs a place called Santuario. It's down in the Peruvian jungle. It's on the boiling river outside of Pucallpa, and been going there now for 3-4 years and taking people down there. And plenty of people have gone down there and done what's called a dieta, and we'll get into talking about that later for those of you who don't know what any of this is. We're definitely going to talk about the jungle medicines, what I've learned from them, what, they can be for a lot of things, how I've used them and what it's been. And it's been truly a lot of clearing negative entities out, get them out. And like I said, I'll go into that deeper in time. So yeah, I've been doing that for, taking people down to Peru, doing those ceremonies for about 10 years. And now, that brings us to now. So, I mean, there's a whole lot I've skipped over, of course. And as I said earlier, we'll get into some of those stories because it has to do with some of the content of the topics we're going to cover. And we'll have guests on. Like I said, my friend Chip, great guy, he's a Zen Buddhist. He's and he's been that the whole time I've known him, and I've known him for now about 30 years. And he's been a solid person in my life. He's got a lot to offer and a different take than most of what that Zen Buddhism is aiming at. I think it's just, I've tried to keep this simple over the years, and the things I say won't be complicated. I'm not going to use big words. It's not going to be a lot of complicated concepts. It's going to be pretty simple. And I'm going to try to keep it that way as much as possible because, the easier it is to understand without having to go into some weird giant concept about everything, the easier it is for us to actually move into participation with what's looking out of our eyeballs instead of having thoughts about what's looking out of our eyeballs. It's a much different experience from thinking about presence, spirit, all things mystical and holy. And it's a whole nother to experience that. nothing really mystical going on. There is a way that human beings can recover the power they've lost. And to me, that's the work that Carlos and Don Juan and that whole lineage of Nawals that goes back thousands of years, that was their business. Their business was how to have the spirit of a warrior, how to have the warrior spirit. It's an actual component of our being. It's almost as if we were brought here to bring life force as consciousness to this planet and interact from a more conscious state than anything else here is. And I guess the way to put that was put to me this way in a ceremony one night, and I think it really it's just poetic and beautiful, kind of explains it. Consciousness sleeps in the stone. It dreams in the plant. It awakens in the animal and is realized in the human. So the human, what it brings is if it can realize that fullness of consciousness and be completely connected to what's beating the heart, looking out of the eyeballs, giving you the ability to think, giving you a platform on which you build an identity, having a direct link with that is really the work at hand. Because that makes your life, I wouldn't necessarily say meaningful, but it has a point and it has a purpose. And, is it a big one? Are we here to change the world? No, we're here to change ourselves. I've often said that this world is a three-walled prison. Those that get stuck, it's because they are the fourth wall of that prison. There's nothing here that can trap you. But if you give it your attention, you're the fourth wall of that prison. And yeah, kind of hard to break through yourself. So the next episode we're going to do is going to be on the manufactured identity and what I'm talking about when I say that and what it does as far as I've noticed, observed, and experienced. And I think most people have experienced the same thing. So I don't think it's going to be content that's going to be foreign to you. Whether you've taken plants or not, whether you're even really about a spiritual path or not really sure what that is. I'm not really sure what that is. I know what Spirit Road is, but I don't know what that's not a path. The ego mind, the thinking mind, the rational mind, the being that's coming from lacking something would even begin to understand. Not even remotely. So to clear up some of this, we'll start at the beginning and we'll move forward. So we'll definitely be talking a lot about what Carlos taught me, what the elders taught me, as it pertains to the content that we'll have. So yeah, we're going to have some guests next time and just have people in the room with us, so this is more of a conversation and less of just me sitting here talking. Because, I could go off on tangents pretty easily. And so it's nice to have these guys around to keep me on point. So as we go into these topics and content, I'll make sure they're there so if I start rambling or I go off on a tangent, they can go, yo. We might even have that box from the Dave Chappelle show. Wrap it up. So we can move on and keep this, this train moving and not have it derail and not say the same thing every single podcast, because that would be rather boring after a while. But anyway, we'll get into that content soon. Again, this is Wide Awake in Babylon. How do we stay awake when the world around us is trying to make us go to sleep? How do we stay in integrity when obviously the people running this world are completely batshit insane? It's becoming quite obvious. And they seem to have nefarious plans for us. It seems that way. So this is going to be hard to navigate. The next decade, probably two, is going to be pretty hard to navigate. And, so hopefully, this will be my contribution to whoever listens. It's not like I have an important message for the world. I have some observations for those willing to listen. And I think they're good. They've served me. I've watched them serve others. I've watched others crash and burn. They couldn't actually part with this self-importance, this identity that's crystallized around their soul and keeps their soul in prison. They've just doubled down on that, and off they go. They don't know what freedom is. So, we're going to get into those concepts of freedom, of consciousness, of awareness, of will, which is rarely spoken of in the spiritual communities, in the medicine community, in the ayahuasca world. Will is never mentioned. I've never heard anybody talk about it, but it's a very big aspect of our Constitution. It's actually the most powerful thing we have. It's just we don't own it, and we need to own it again. We need to get our attention out of the traps, because it's been captured, to be something less than what you are intended to be by the Great Spirit, by the mystery, whatever you want to call that. We were intending to go somewhere, and we've gotten sidetracked. We've gotten distracted. We've gotten captured. We have basically gotten to the edge of a cliff we were supposed to leap from and just built a big, comfortable world there full of nonsense, mainly nonsense. I know some people will not agree with me and think I'm being too sharp and harsh. But let's face it, most of human activity is nonsense. Most of what we watch on TV, on TikTok video, it's pure nonsense. There's no thing going on there. I mean, obviously, there's better content coming out on these social media platforms, thank God. But again, the bulk of it's just nonsense. So, that's where we've gone into nonsense, into madness. As a society, we surely have. We're just consumers. We have forgotten that we are living beings with things called soul and presence and will and awareness and energy and attention and things that really, really are very important if we're to go any further on this journey. So that's the content we'll be getting into. And the third episode is going to be on the manufactured identity. Manufactured identity and how it screws you over and over and over and over and over again. And get into the content of how it does it. And maybe a possibility of how to put that down. So anyway, that's our next episode. It'll be out probably about a week or so. Anyway, I'm going to cut this short because, I can go on and on and on and on. And, well, now there's a podcast. I don't have to. I can save some for later. So anyway, that's the bio side of it. That's, that's who I am. Hopefully you've garnered some, as much understanding as you possibly could have about a person you may not know. I tend to be honest in this, that's my intention, is to, not really embellish too much on stories. Trying to be as, straight to the point as I can. Not get overhyped in the content, just lay it out there. I think it's interesting enough on its own. It stands on its own. So anyway, hope you keep joining us. Hope you're enjoying this. If you guys have any suggestions for, a topic, we're willing to take them in. If you want to engage this, we're going to go on Rumble. We'll go on YouTube. We'll go on Spotify. We'll be on those. And, we'll start building it as we go. We're on the ground floor, second episode. So hope this train goes full steam ahead. I fully intend to have it go that way, regardless of who watches it. Ha, 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 ha. Anyway, big love to you. Hope you are having a good evening. Hope you have a good day tomorrow. Take care. Celebrate your victories. Put your war bonnets back on in the morning because this shit ain't over yet. Do your best to be a human being in this world while everybody else is being an avatar. All right. Good night. See you later.
That one was good.
Yeah?
Yeah, that was real good.